So first of all, thank you so much for the Observatorium for the invitation. Personally, with the persons of Carla and also of Laura. For me, it's really a pleasure to be here. I mean, this is my home country, so definitely there is a warmness that goes with this presentation. And of course, also it's very good to be here, especially in Oporto as well. Just for starting, I mean, it was clear that I'm an employer, not employee, of Tilray, and so that is my disclosure. I'll try to be as neutral as possible, but this is a disclosure that I have to present to you. As a content of the information that I would like to share and the thoughts I would like to share to the group, and I'm then very happy to then receive your comments and questions afterwards, is basically to try to share with you what are the principles that govern medicines approval processes and how this can be important in decision-making also processes of policymakers. Alongside with that, what could be the criteria to justify a special access scheme for cannabinoid-based products? And thirdly, how could we capture evidence to justify the clinical added value of those products? And let's say, last but not least, what could be the conclusions of those reflections that I would like to have with you? I mean, the first one is the principles that govern medicines approval processes. And I mean, you may be aware that a medicine, or better say a compound, when it starts, it's a very long, demanding, challenging, quite also an investment behind that same clinical development. But one note that I would like to give to the group is the basis of such requirements are in fact public health. Public health is the basis of such a long process that compounds have till they reach the final, let's say, the final destination as medicines. And I think during the last developments of medicines authorization laws, all over the globe, we faced really some cases that show how important it is to safeguard the processes. And also, just to add, those same cases shaped also the process as they were occurring. I mean, probably you know about thalidomide. It was a medicine that was probably the biggest milestone in terms of approval processes. It was marketed by a German company, and it indeed created quite a substantial impact in the society back then. I mean, more recently, and there is in fact plenty of cases, but I just then trying to just bring more recent cases. I don't know if you are aware about cases in Latin America. Those are just the deaths that occur in Panama, the city where Dr. Sandra works now, and there are more. I mean, probably there was Vioxx, was probably the most mediated one in more, let's say, recent times, and let's say not far away, 10 years ago, especially with the epicentric in France. The mediator case was in fact a very well-known as well. And all of them, especially this last one, definitely contributed to the last update of the regulations that govern pharmacovigilance for medicines in Europe, okay? This just to say that there is in fact a reason why things work like that in the medicines world. And the baseline is safeguarding our health as a community, okay? And there is one basic principle, that's the one that I would like to build upon, that basically an authorization, and every time that a medicines agency does look to a file, seeks to obtain a clarification whether the benefits of the proposed indication outweigh the risks in a proven product quality. That's the general approach. And I would like to grab this general approach to try to understand how far can we build bridges to the data that we have now for cannabinoid-based medicine products. And the question is, if those benefits outweigh the risks today, okay, knowing that we are outside the formal medicines frame and legal frame. My personal question is yes. And I would like to guide you through what could be a thought process regarding some criteria that could justify, from a policy-making standpoint, special schemes. I think that we could divide them basically in four main pillars. One is a concrete high unmet medical need of the conditions for which cannabinoids can be treated or can be applicable for. The second one is definitely we need to have a grasp of the possible benefits and definitely characterization of the risks. And lastly, also the product quality. Remember the case in Panama. The case in Panama was a product quality issue that somehow inundated Latin America, especially in Panama. That was definitely the biggest country that was affected by that. And I would like to somehow make a reflection around those four pillars. I mean, the first one, as unmet medical need, I'm just going to grab one example that is in fact chronic pain, just because it's definitely the most prevalent utilization based on epidemiological data that we have nowadays with cannabinoids being used as cannabinoid-based medicine products. And just for you to give you kind of an idea about the burden of disease, there was kind of a seminal epidemiological study that was published in 2006. There was also, by the way, a very similar one that was published here in Portugal, that is in fact based here in the Faculty of Medicine of Oporto, that somehow reached the very, let's say, impressive data that 1/5 of the European adults do suffer from chronic pain, irrespectively of the intensity. But then 1/3 of them have severe chronic pain, okay? And if we grab the data that this epidemiological data offers us, we see that 1/3 of patients clearly say that they cannot tolerate any more pain than the one that they have in the day that they have these responses. So quite over demanding in terms of intensity, but not less important is the time for which those same patients got the disease and have to suffer and live with that condition. I mean, more than half of the patients, as you can see, the patients that have moderate or severe pain, they have more than 5 years of dealing with that condition, and more or less 20% of those live with it for more than 20 years. So the refractory patients and treatable patients that unmet medical need lies really here. And one important factor, I mean, those patients here, they are not waiting to be medicated. They are already on therapy. The pain intensity that they communicate is already being medicated. They are not queuing up just to get a recipe, okay? This is a very important factor. I'm not going to dissect any longer epilepsy. I mean, Dr. Sandra mentioned this already quite extensively. I would like just to bring the two elements. Somehow chronic pain is a kind of a silent burden of disease. No one speaks about chronic pain, but it's there, lively, in everyone's communities, while epilepsy gets really quite dramatic, especially because, of course, the drama, or especially of children, of course. And I would like to, as a conclusion of this particular point, just share with you the thoughts of the balance between the benefits and the risks, and how far patients are more willing to step to certain risks when they have, in fact, untreatable conditions, or when they do not really have any more resources to deal with. And the same, in fact, is applicable for healthcare professionals that deal with those same patients. And that is, in fact, even from an ethical perspective, something that can balance the decision-making process for policymakers, for example, okay, as benefits and as risks. For possible benefits, I'm not going to dig into the data that exists at the moment. There is, in fact, some vast information available from systematic literature reviews, or more, let's say, more addressable literature reviews. Because of the methodology that you can follow those, some results may vary, and may vary even significantly. But I want just to pinpoint the fact that there is already available information about the possible benefits of cannabinoids in fact, in very significant number of conditions. And I would like also for you to have in mind the amount of publications that just exploded over the last decades. That just speaks that there is a lot of information that exists out there, and it keeps going. I mean, that last slide spoke about the information that exists today. Much more will come in several forms. I mean, this is the list, for example, of the distribution of clinical trials, ongoing clinical trials all over the world. The ones that are registered in clinicaltrial.govs, there are probably more. I think one important aspect, definitely probably the most important aspect for the decision making and from a policy health perspective is definitely how do you characterize the risks of something that has not been under a systematic medicines approval process. And within, definitely we need to somehow separate what could be short-term and long-term risks. And within especially the long-term risks, I think that we have the possibility of incorporating recreational setting data that definitely helps decision-making processes in terms of the information that this can provide to the community, to the scientific community. I mean, in terms of short-term risks, I'm not going to bother with the most incident side effects that cannabinoid-based medicines have. I mean, those are pretty much more drive by THC, although of course CBD also contributes to some of them. But I would like to pinpoint two factors. I mean, the first one is that serious adverse events are somehow rare if we just pile the information that exists out there, and the majority of side effects are in fact transient. Basically, the human body has this ability of getting tolerance to the side effects of cannabinoids. And I think one very important aspect that we can also conclude from the few long-term studies that exist out there in the literature using that can be retrieved from the medical setting is that the data that you observe in long-term studies does not differ that much from the one that you can have on short-term ones. But I think that also a very important aspect that contributes to this is the fact that nowadays we have get more and more extensive databases that definitely can contribute to the fact that without a specific sign, this contributes to safeguard the security and relative safety of such compounds. I think the long-term safety I referred briefly can also be extracted or retrieved, better saying, from recreational use settings. There, I mean, the biggest two ones are in fact the cannabinoid, the substance-dependent disorder that we can get from that information that already pictures and profiles cannabinoid medicine in that particular case, and also, let's say, the psychiatric disorders that are there. Although, of course, as you may know, there could be also a therapeutic target in there. I mean, the other ones are a little bit mixed in terms of results. But one important point that I'd like to share with you is how far this has been known so well compared to active medicines that exist out there. And I just pull here some of the evidence that exists, for example, in terms of guidelines for neuropathic pain. And I mean, in any of those medicines that were studied that followed a normal medicines pathway, I have doubts that the long-term safety profile is or can be as better, let's say, deducted as the one that we can do with certain cannabinoids. And last but not least, under those four pillars is in fact product quality. I mean, product quality is key to safeguard the decision-making process of this kind. How much can we have a special access scheme if we cannot really justify that the product quality is at the level that the authorities demand? I mean, nowadays, in fact, several industries have GMP processes, certification of GMP processes by competent authorities. That's not a novelty. The thing is that Policymakers must be aware that patients nowadays are seeking illegal markets and are seeking illegal markets for treating their medicines issues. And of course, without medical supervision, that's one important aspect. And secondly, without safeguarding the product quality. I mean, recently this data appeared last week regarding the fact that almost, let's say, if we extrapolate the data for the UK population, around about 1.4 million British citizens, they seek medical cannabis at the street from illegal sources to treat their medical conditions. Although, as you may be aware, I mean, there was already the rescheduling of cannabinoids in the UK, but still this persists. And of course, there is already data out there that shows the existence of poor quality, of poor product quality, and we even have one of the authors of one of those publications among us that really shows that patients are seeking, and at least partially some of the products do not really meet the quality that they should meet. And of course, this at the end is a serious public health risk. That was somehow a kind of just a snapshot of what exists today, and I think that we should have a clear understanding that what exists today, even if regulations already allow, is not enough. I mean, I'm coming from Germany. Germany, everyone is allowed every physician is allowed to prescribe cannabinoid-based medicines for intractable patients. But if I say to you that only round about 0.1% of physicians prescribe it, you can really see the magnitude of patients that are out there seeking that cannot really have access. And you're talking about Germany that has already almost 3 years of this law ongoing. And definitely we need to capture more evidence for the future. I mean, this is simply a must. And definitely for that we need to follow the most sounding evidence that could provide, let's say, for decision-making bodies and also healthcare professionals, the best information for their decisions. And that we should integrate definitely with our patients' values, patient preferences regarding the therapy, the best evidence that exists out there, and of course, also a very important element, the clinical expertise that goes along with that. I mean, clinical trials definitely are a very important element that should be something that the society should seek for the future, getting information from clinical trials. I mean, but it's not only that. If you follow, I mean, the last 2 years about FDA and EMA, European Medicines Agency, view upon real-world evidence, you can really see that they are seeking much more information from that source. And basically, it's not any novelty that both agencies already approved some indications in the past 15 years, even more, 20 years, without RCTs in some of those conditions. Mainly, you're talking mainly oncology. But the fact is that the agencies are giving a clear sign that upon certain guidelines, they are willing to accept certain things. And but I think a very important element that goes along with that real-world evidence frame is trying to find alternative trial designs. And in this aspect, I challenge you to read this very short editorial from Tom Freeman that was published last month. That gives, it's a very short reading, very nice one, that really gives a very nice hint about how can, for example, N of 1 trials participate in such quests of getting more and quality data around cannabinoid-based medicine. And of course, registries. I mean, this is just a snapshot of what we are capturing at the moment from Australia that already gives somehow clear tendencies of healthcare professionals' preferences of certain products through certain conditions. And of course, this is not unique from us. Much more is out there, much more will come. To conclude this part, I mean, pharmacovigilance systems, once implemented, they can contribute a lot not only to the safeguard of patient safety, and somehow signaling what could be problems around the products of that specific company or that specific geographical area. But just to give you a snapshot what we have now from Canada, basically the information that we have from Canada from critical or severe adverse events that are, I must say to you, they are mandatory that healthcare professionals should flag this to in this case, to the licensed producer, that is the name of the status of the companies there. I mean, we have, let's say, 10,000 patient years in our database in Canada, and we have one severe side effect. Of course, we know that from pharmacovigilance standpoint, not all healthcare professionals report, but this already gives a sign. And just for you to know, I mean, this concrete patient, it was not even a cannabinoid-related side effect. He was allergic to the oil that was present in the formulation, okay? And that was the only one that even was considered to be a severe case. Alongside, an exercise that we did was coming from that database, we tried to understand what was the reorder rate of the patients that demand product from us. As you may know, patients interact directly with licensed producers in Canada, and we tried to understand along the time, what was the amount that they were ordering per time? And then we can deduct easily what was the variance over time. And the variance over time is really quite stable, meaning that there is not a lot of tolerance going on for the treatments they are seeking. Somehow we really see a very consistent and very flat curve of the reordering rate. And just to conclude, I think that what we have now today and what we have most probably in the future, take into account the exponential information that exists out there that is being produced every single, I will not say even every single month, I will say every single week. I think that all stakeholders together should somehow get along to make sure that those special access schemes get into a certain place to benefit the ones that are in fact in the middle, that are in fact patients. I mean, those are the ones that are seeking out there in every single community, in every single continent, in every single country. And I deeply believe this is a demand that all the stakeholders should seek. And basically to conclude, I mean, I think that we agree with me that, I mean, this is a unique case in modern medicine. I never saw something that could be even close to what we are living for with cannabinoids today. And definitely it's a new dilemma. It's a new dilemma that everyone should deal with. And for that we really need some innovative policies, because we cannot be stuck with the frame that exists for medicines, that should exist, I insist, but the constellation of facts and evidence that we have at the moment demands something else to cover patients' needs. And this because, I mean, the seriousness of the conditions that we are dealing with, I think is really in certain cases really quite extreme. And to conclude, I mean, the last point, I think that for developing and for reinforcing the clinical added value of cannabinoid-based medicines, we need to work together, because otherwise it will not result, or at least it will not result to the time that I think patients demand. And lastly, as a matter of a conclusion, I don't know who is a newcomer to the city, please try to enjoy it. I love it, and I'm not biased because I'm not from here, but try to enjoy it because it's really lovely. And yeah, thank you for listening, and thank you for taking let's say your time, and thank you. Okay, thank you so much.
Take a sip.
Everybody's
you know me.
There is a problem.
Yeah, there's a problem with this tip. We have two questions from the app. We're going to try to be brief so that we can go for lunch. So first question is from Virginia Saraiva. Yes, right over there. Where are the clinical trials carried out in Portugal?
Where are? Where are the clinical trials carried in Portugal? I mean, from our side, we do not really have none going on at the moment.
Maybe there's no microphone there, but yes, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, but it's not ours. To be honest with you, I don't know exactly what is there, but I'm happy to share with you some more thoughts on that. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. There's a special question from Cristina
There
Sanchez.
is. Cristina Sanchez doesn't know something? Wow. This is extraordinary. Cristina asks, Doctor, you propose that the first pillar to develop cannabis medicines is to find a high unmet medical need, unquote. Does that mean that according to you, the only targets for cannabis-based medicines are refractory ailments? Or do you think that there is room for cannabinoid medicines to eventually become first-line treatments for ailments that currently have other therapeutic options?
Good question. Good question. I think that from a policy-making perspective, and that's the reason why I started with medicines, that's the way policy-making bodies tick. And I think that from that perspective, if we balance the benefits and risks according to that specific frame, the ones that definitely demand treatment are in fact the refractory patients, the untreatable patients, the patients that you cannot really control what exists out there. I think that I would dare to say I'm almost sure that the latter is going up quite fast in the next 10 to 15 years, because the amount of information that exists out there is just going to increase so much, and the evidence definitely is going to be alongside with it, that from a guideline perspective, because I think, I mean, that's another aspect. I mean, normal guidelines are produced or from public bodies or from scientific societies, and they are driven by pretty much robust evidence-based medicine guidelines. And I'm pretty sure that we'll get there. Probably now, according to those guidelines, we cannot be there. Okay.
Thank you. We have another question from Ana Rita Delgado, and it's the final one. Yes. At this moment, what are the cannabinoid medications accepted in Germany for medical purposes? If you can say some commercial names, of course.
What are
What are the cannabinoid medications accepted in Germany for medical purposes?
Well, Germany is a very special country, I may say, generally speaking. And I think the way that they regulated medical cannabis is not the only country in Europe for that. They regulated this via a magistral preparation from the pharmacy, meaning that any company that is present in Germany does not sell a finished product. Basically, they sell, I would say, raw material for pharmacies to compound then products. And that's a very important difference. So basically, from a formal perspective, the pharmacy is free to produce whatever is demanded by the physician. Okay, it's a very unique scheme. Most probably, just to complement, the future, my personal vision, it will change, because there is a lot of, probably you know that in Germany, those products are reimbursed. They are reimbursed 100% if the sick funds, because the health system works a little bit different from the Portuguese one, if the sick funds allowed with the justification of the physician. And the fact is that the margin of the pharmacy increases tremendously the costs for patients. Okay, and I'm sure that because there is an increased uptake of the utilization of medical cannabis to patients, of course, I think that there's going to be soon some changes. Soon, I'm not saying if it's 1 year or 2 years, but soon some changes, because this will be a burden in the health system. Okay, this extra cost that does not provide any single value in the supply chain. So I think that in 1 or 2 years you can have that question responded.
Thank you.
We're going to ask you to use the microphone,
Yeah.
and if possible to speak in English for the
Question was?
translators.
My question was more about what are the cannabinoid medications available now in the German market for medical purposes?
You mean like dry flower, like oral solutions, like this type of, or you mean by if it's THC, if it's CBD?
Brands, I believe you want brands.
Yeah, general brands.
There is no brands. I mean, there is no brands. There is companies working. That's one thing. There is company working, but the company sells raw material for the pharmacies. What the patient gets is a bottle of something that was produced in the pharmacy.
For specifically that patient.
For a specific patient and according to a specific prescription.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
It's a very special setting. It's not unique. Eastern Europe also have one or two countries with that. But in the end, we do not really have a finished product with a specific brand. What you have is like, I don't know if you recall some products that you even find here in Portugal in the pharmacies, especially for dermatological conditions. And it's something that you have there, but now for medicinal cannabis.
So Tilray doesn't have a specific medication on the German market?
We do have, but the pharmacy compounds it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next question.
There's another one.
Thank you, yes. Leonardo Celsa? Leonardo, thank you. Talking about chronic pain. In many cases, physicians prescribe tramadol. But with the years, human body increases the resistance. And I know people taking this, and every 5 to 6 months they have to up their dosage, which is not uncommon with other type of drugs. Do you think we should use cannabinoids for those people in pain and that the meds don't work as they should?
If the med does not work as they should?
What I believe he's suggesting that because you have to take continued dosage to have the same efficacy, do cannabinoids have a better effect with not having to increase the dosage?
Correct.
Is that fair? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think the observational data that we now have from cannabinoids clearly state that once you reach, after the titration, when you reach a kind of a more controlled dose, that dose tends to be quite stable over time. I mean, for opioids, there is in fact some risk of tolerance, and you mentioned tramadol. I must also disclose that I was working in my past in the company that developed tramadol, okay? So, but just to say that I know that there is in fact some development that is not exclusive of tramadol. You have it also not only for minor opioids, but also some strong opioids as well. And in this respect, the information that we have seems encouraging to state something like that. Seems encouraging, but we need more robust data for that.
We have another question over there.
Hello.
Janos, yes.
Just wanted to answer one quick thing for the question about the German market before. In a doctor's perspective, in Germany we have currently the situation that we have 42 different strains of cannabis available on the paper. I mean, if they are disponible in the pharmacy, it's a different question, but on the paper, they come from the 4, 5, 6 bigger companies. So the way of distribution in Germany is through magistral preparations. This is the difference. So it's no finished product, but it's a product which comes from certain pharmaceutical companies. There is Tilray, there is Bedrocan, there are different ones. And we have, besides that, Dronabinol from Bionorica, Zativex, Epidiolex from GW Pharmaceuticals. So there are companies, just the distribution way of it, it's through magistral preparations, because this allows us to work with full spectrum oils or to have preparations with a high amount of active principles, which in a different way would not be possible. Mm-hmm. But just for understanding, it was right what you said, but to clear it a little bit more further away. So of course, there are producers, there are brands, they are selling the oils, but the preparation used in the end, it's the strain, and this is like goes out through the magistral preparation. I don't know if you explained it.
Thanks, Janos.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, great. Front row.
Yeah, I guess it's the last one.
Okay, last one.
Just quickly. I see that the number of patients that are looking for the medicines in illegal ways. Do you think that a harm reduction approach could be that the pharmaceuticals have labs where people could take the oils or the plant material to get analysis, and also for you to get data from those patients, because I believe that patients that already tried something that worked for their condition, they will keep on looking for it.
Yeah.
So I think maybe a harm reduction approach could be a solution to get data from these patients, as well as to guarantee the quality of the medicine people are taking.
Yeah, no, it's a good comment and it's a good vision. I mean, there is not a lot of insights about that particular pool, because that was a survey that was conducted in the UK. I mean, of course, we do not know exactly what are those patients, but I think that your comment makes sense.
I think it's people who already tried medicine.
Yes.
And it has worked, they will keep on.
Yes.
Looking
Yes.
for it, because when it's available, it's very expensive or very hard to get.
Mhm.
So if the government can find a way that assure that the quality is okay and they can use it, maybe it's a good way to get data.
Both ways.
Yeah, from the data perspective. Yeah.
So thank you so much. Thank you
Thank
for the
you.
questions.
Thank you.
Again. Yeah.